The Sahara Desert has what's called a prevailing wind pattern. The wind almost always blows the same way. This creates a serious problem. The hot air comes off the desert, kills the trees next door, and that area becomes desert. The process is called desertification. You can read about it in an earth science book. Sahara Desert has been studied very carefully. They did a long study on this and said, you know what, folks, the Sahara Desert is probably about 4,000 years old.
So that rocked. Seriously, is that not cool or what?
This is what we mean by an example of soft tissue which was collected from the Triceratops horn in Montana. I'm going to stretch it. Look at how stretchy this is. And this is full of bone osteocytes, the tiny cells that make this tissue and then impregnate it with bone mineral. And this was found 1 foot from the surface in Montana in the presence of insects, microbes, rodents, plants, and fungal bodies. And we've recovered the DNA of all of those.
World Trade Center 7 collapsed because of fires. We really have a new kind of progressive collapse that we have discovered here, which is a fire-induced progressive collapse.
According to NIST, the collapse was triggered by the failure of one specific column, number 79, located in the northeastern section of the building.
So you look at the floors failing here, and eventually this column 79 is going to buckle, it fails, and then the entire vertical progression takes place.
NIST blamed thermal expansion as the phenomenon that caused the collapse, which was also an absolute first in history.
Our study has identified thermal expansion as a new phenomenon that can cause the collapse of a structure. For the first time, we have shown that fire can induce a progressive collapse.
Coming from such a reputable organization, these kinds of statements should have sent shockwaves through the architectural world.
What they're telling us is that our existing building codes, to which thousands of skyscrapers are currently designed, there's a serious problem.
If NIST's findings were true, hundreds of skyscrapers from all over the world would suddenly be in danger of a collapse due to fire. This should have called for the immediate suspension of all high-rise constructions, widespread verifications in all existing skyscrapers, and a serious revision of fire codes and safety regulations for the new ones to be built.
Researchers say a new study shows all modern humans are descendants from a common father and mother who appeared on the scene 100 to 200,000 years ago after a cataclysmic event almost wiped out the human race.
You can create the entire universe out of nothing.
Hedge funds must be regulated to stop the global crisis. He's avoiding the rules.
Why is it that Americans can't invest in the quantum fund? It's an offshore fund. Why is that?
Because the fund is not registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission. We are not
licensed to do business in the United States.
That's right.
Because?
Because we are not registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Because we find it more convenient to operate without it.
So in some ways it's to escape regulation?
Yeah, that's right.
But you've been sitting here talking about the need for regulation.
I am not asking anybody to take a chance on me. I'm asking you to take a chance on your own aspirations.
I'm not just asking you to take a chance on me. I'm also asking you to take a chance on your own aspirations.
We have serious problems to solve, and we need serious people to solve them.
In Australia, we have serious challenges to solve, and we need serious people to solve them.
The world judged the Iraqi regime was a dangerous aggressor. In the interests of world peace and regional security, the community of nations required Iraq to surrender its offensive arsenal.
The world judged the Iraqi regime to be a dangerous aggressor. In the interests of world peace and regional security, the community of nations expelled Iraq from Kuwait, required Iraq to surrender its offensive arsenal.
By taking the tough decisions, tough long-term decisions,
Punch and Judy.
The Punch and Judy politics.
As we stand on the crossroads of history, I know we can make the right choices and meet the challenges that lay before us.
And that as we stand on the crossroads of history, we can make the right choices and meet the challenges that face us.
Where am I?
the first clinic in 1,000 generations to be able to get to university? Why is Glenys the first woman in her family in 1,000 generations?
And I started thinking as I was coming over here, why is it that Joe Biden is the first in his family ever to go to a university? Why is it that my wife, who's sitting out there in the audience, is the first in her family to ever go to college?
All of us are going to be just fine, no matter what happens.
Whatever happens, we're going to be fine.
But what's at stake is whether America is going to be fine.
I just hope that we'll be able to say the same thing about the American people.
He's only interested in two things: making Australians afraid of it and telling them who's to blame for it.
He is interested in two things, and two things only: making you afraid of it and telling you who's to blame for it.
You work hard for what you want in life. We want our children and all children in this nation.
We want our children in this nation.
The only limit to the height of your achievements is the reach of your dreams and your willingness to work hard for them.
Islam teaches peace.
The face of terror is not the true faith.
Muslims the world over aspire to live with dignity and a sense of justice.
Composite of data sets from several different instruments translated into a picture.
To us, the really cool thing was the data set. Up until that point, there was no realistic color map of the globe anywhere.
So the land layer here comes from
the Moderate Resolution Imaging Spectroradiometer aboard Terra.
And the tricky part here was the weather.
So we actually had to take clouds out.
They stashed the clouds for later, went onto the ocean. That came from an instrument that measures phytoplankton in the sea.
Where it was low, I colored it dark blue because they're low mostly in mid-oceans. And then where it was a little bit higher, it was like a little bit brighter green.
Then add the clouds back in.
There's a small problem with it because there's a very slight gap in between each orbit.
So some of those are painted on.
It is photoshopped, but it's has to be.
Then
there was another layer to sort of simulate the atmosphere.
And then there's this little bright spot.
It's called the specular highlight. So it's the reflection of sunlight off of water.
Those are the pieces, but you can't just slap them all together.
It just didn't look realistic. It looks kind of flat, or the clouds are sort of too see-through. So I just hit Command-Z a lot.
There's artistry to creating the world.
What I imagine it to be. Unfortunately, I'm not an astronaut. I've never been to space. But I've looked at these images over and over again, trying to sort of get the essence of it. It is photoshopped, but it's has to be.
Now, one thing I really want your generation to embrace is that the Earth is a closed system. We cannot leave the Earth. There's no place to go. Now, one thing I really want your generation to embrace